Instantly claiming central territory, d4 sets the stage for queenside expansion or rapid knight development. Developing the knight to a central square like f6 immediately contests white's central pawn, setting the stage for dynamic imbalances. Securing central influence while preparing for potential kingside castling, this move aims for a flexible development. Challenging the center immediately, c5 aims to disrupt white's intended pawn structure and open lines for counterplay. Pushing the pawn exerts immediate pressure, forcing black to reevaluate their central pawn structure and piece development. Challenging white's central space, black immediately seeks to expand on the queen side, aiming to disrupt white's pawn structure and gain counterplay. Challenging the queenside pawn structure, white immediately seeks to exploit the exposed black pawn on b5 and gain central influence. Developing the bishop here shores up the pawn chain and opens diagonal lines, contesting central influence. Preparing to fianchetto, the bishop offers a long-term defensive structure, but it concedes valuable central space and invites a kingside pawn storm if white isn't careful. Solidifying the pawn structure and preparing for a fianchetto, this move anticipates a kingside expansion. Solidifying the kingside and preparing to pressure the queenside pawns, this bishop fianchetto aims to control the long diagonal, putting black's b5 pawn and potential queenside expansion under scrutiny. Capturing the pawn immediately throws open the queenside and creates a significant structural imbalance for black to manage, potentially sacrificing piece activity for a material gain that might prove temporary. Centralizing that knight, this develops a piece and pressures the d6 square, preparing for a potential kingside pawn storm. Developing the bishop to a potent diagonal that eyes the queenside and supports potential central advances allows for harmonious piece play, anticipating any pawn advances from white that could restrict black's position. Securing the king allows white to consolidate and prepare for the inevitable pawn storm on the queenside, a wise precautionary measure before engaging in further central skirmishes. Securing the monarch is paramount, especially with an open diagonal now pointing towards the kingside. Unleashing a knight into the heart of black's camp, this advance creates immediate pressure on the central dark squares and aims to disrupt the harmony of black's queenside pawn structure, potentially opening lines for further assault. Injecting a pawn to the center, black immediately contests the d-pawn's advance and seeks to open lines for their bishop and queen. This pawn push creates crucial central tension, potentially offering counterplay on the queen side if white chooses to maintain the pawn structure rather than capture. It's a dynamic decision that promises an active middle game. Seizing the central outpost with the knight initiates a crucial positional battle for control of the d6 square, potentially disrupting black's pawn structure and opening lines for white's pieces. Developing the knight to a more central square offers better support for the central pawns and prepares to contest the d5 pawn, creating dynamic pawn tension and potential outpost opportunities on e4. Refocusing pressure along the open e-file, this tempo-gaining maneuver aims to prepare for the eventual pawn push e4, asserting further central control and potentially creating attacking opportunities against black's somewhat passive setup. Unleashing the bishop's diagonal from its post on a6, black aims to challenge white's central grip and exploit the potential for pressure along the queen side. The queen's foray to the flank immediately challenges the advanced bishop on a6 and aims to disrupt black's pawn structure by potentially creating doubled pawns on the c-file, should black capture the pawn on c4. This active repositioning hints at a dynamic struggle where white seeks to exploit any weaknesses in black's newly formed central pawn chain, while simultaneously preparing for further piece development and potential kingside operations. Black unifies the rooks and reinforces the d-pawn, signaling a defensive posture while preparing for potential central counterplay or even a queenside pawn push if white overextends. The knight ventures deep into enemy territory, a bold outpost aiming to disrupt black's queenside pawn structure and potentially infiltrate the light squares. This aggressive positioning forces a reaction, as the black queen must now address this immediate threat. It's a gambit for central influence, betting that black cannot adequately defend their pawns while simultaneously maintaining overall coordination. A daring knight repositioning, this maneuver seeks to exploit the pin on the a6 bishop and initiate an immediate counterstrike on white's queenside pawn structure, aiming to destabilize the center and create dynamic play. Unleashing the queen, white seeks to exploit the exposed dark squares on the queenside while simultaneously threatening to infiltrate black's territory. This aggressive repositioning hints at an ambition to seize the initiative, potentially setting up a mating net or forcing concessions in material or positional advantage as black scrambles to defend. Finally, black secures the e-file, a crucial diagonal for the dark-squared bishop now opening up, and prepares to contest the otherwise unchallenged white rook. Opening up the h-file now creates immediate diagonal pressure on black's king, seeking to exploit any lingering weaknesses from the earlier pawn push. Securing the queen's retreat from the menacing knight and preparing to challenge the center feels like a prudent step, shifting focus towards liberating the cramped queenside pawns. Pressing the knight to c6, white initiates a daring central thrust, aiming to exploit black's slightly less developed queenside and potentially disrupt the harmony of their pieces. This aggressive positioning might also pave the way for a later advance of the e-pawn, further cramping black's mobility and creating a powerful central wedge. Observe how the knight now pins down the e-pawn, limiting black's options and forcing a reaction. A crucial defensive maneuver is initiated, aiming to liberate the bishop from its passive confinement on a6 and simultaneously redeploy it to a more active diagonal, potentially eyeing the kingside. This retreat also clears the way for the rook to potentially contest the open c-file or offer defensive support along the third rank. Initiating a central pawn advance, e4 aims to seize more space and create opportunities for the remaining pieces to join the fray, potentially opening lines towards black's castled position and challenging the knight on d7. Black retreats the knight, consolidating the pawn structure after white's central pawn push and regrouping for a more solid defense, while subtly preparing to challenge the open lines and create counterplay on the queenside. Initiating a pawn storm on the kingside, white aims to disrupt black's castled position and create attacking chances before the queenside counterplay can fully materialize. This aggressive thrust, f4, is a significant commitment, opening the f-file and potentially weakening white's own king if not supported adequately. It signals an intent to seize the initiative decisively, forcing black to react defensively to this sudden surge of attacking energy. Shifting the king away from the immediate confrontation on the f-file offers a welcome respite, preventing potential pawn storms and creating a subtle breathing room for the dark-squared bishop on g7 to find its optimal diagonals later. Unleashing a pawn avalanche, white dramatically injects tension into the center, aiming to shatter black's cramped position and create attacking avenues. This aggressive advance forces a reckoning, potentially opening lines for white's pieces, or, if miscalculated, offering black counterplay. Finally, black breaks the central stranglehold, opening lines and accepting a doubled pawn structure to activate the queenside. Opening the f-file for your rook injects immediate pressure onto black's weakened queenside pawn structure and prepares to assault the enemy king once the center clears further. Reclaiming the pawn immediately, this captures crucial central territory and sets up a potential for active piece play, aiming to unravel white's somewhat cramped setup. Striking that knight into the center opens up the d-file, potentially creating a powerful highway for your rook and queen to exploit the pawn structure vulnerabilities on black's queenside. It's a bold play that forces black to react decisively. The queen's venture to c6, while seemingly a valiant attempt to salvage the material lost on the queenside, creates a dangerous pin along the discovered attack line, potentially exposing the black king to swift retribution. Unleashing a powerful pawn thrust, white dramatically alters the positional landscape by aggressively advancing the e-pawn. This creates immediate tension on the central files and targets the black knight on d7, potentially forcing a retreat or a tactical sacrifice. The pawn's advance also opens lines for white's bishops, particularly the one on g2, which now has a clearer diagonal. Black must carefully assess the consequences, as a misstep could lead to a significant material disadvantage or a compromised king's safety. The dynamic nature of the position is amplified, demanding precise calculation and a keen understanding of tactical possibilities. Initiating a daring knight maneuver to the center, Black aims to disrupt White's pawn structure and potentially exploit the open e-file, though it risks being trapped if White can effectively coordinate their pieces to isolate it. Unleashing a tactical explosion, White offers the rook, aiming to shatter Black's defensive pawn structure and expose the king. This aggressive gambit prioritizes immediate tactical opportunities over maintaining material equality, seeking to exploit the temporary disarray in Black's position. The pressure on the e-file intensifies, forcing Black to make critical decisions that will dictate the subsequent tactical exchanges and the resulting positional landscape. Will Black accept the challenge and enter a sharp, unpredictable phase of the game, or will they seek to consolidate their material advantage? Black finally resolves the awkward pawn structure on the queenside by capturing the encroaching White knight, albeit temporarily. This exchange frees up the d-pawn and offers a slight reprieve from White's aggressive pawn advance, but it does little to address the immediate danger posed by the bishop pair and the open lines that White has masterfully created. The immediate aftermath will likely see White consolidating their superior piece activity and positional pressure. White ignites a tactical wildfire, aiming to expose Black's king with a pawn sacrifice on f7, potentially opening a diagonal for the queen or bishop and creating immediate attacking lines. A pivotal moment arrives as Black finally reclaims the pawn. A necessary act after the king's protection has been dramatically disrupted, yet the looming threat on the f-file remains a significant concern. The unassuming pawn push aims to secure the king's shelter by creating an escape square on h2, simultaneously preparing to contest the crucial h-file should it open, and potentially creating space for the knight to maneuver to a more active square. Clearing the path for the rook to engage the newly opened h-file, this maneuver sets a decisive confrontation in motion, forcing White to immediately address the threat of an exposed king. Unlocking the king's immediate safety and re-establishing central pressure, this repositioning of the knight to a more active square hints at a potential kingside assault or a regrouping to exploit Black's slightly less harmonious piece development. Sacrificing the rook to disrupt White's pawn structure and open lines for counterplay, aiming to exploit the potentially exposed king.